It was a Sunday, and Jessica had plans. Those plans involved a bottle. But there were all these people in her house.
The entire time we were sitting there, all I could think was, it's Sunday. Why are my parents, who are divorced, why are they in the same room, even though they get along, but it was abnormal for them to come together, right? And I thought to myself, I need you guys to leave because Sunday is my drinking day. And so it wasn't until 6 months into recovery and I had a little bit of clarity that my sister was like, hey, sis, like that was an intervention.
Welcome to In This Family, presented by Nexus Family Healing. I'm Dr. Michelle K. Murray, President and CEO. When it comes to a person's life and mind, it can be hard to draw a straight line between cause and effect. Did trauma lead to addiction? Does neurodivergence connect with an obsessive-compulsive disorder? In my experience as a therapist and as a person, I think we need to look at everything in our lives to tell a story. Jessica Guerrieri has been through a lot of mental health experiences in her life. A substance use disorder with alcohol. She's actually been sober now for 12 years. Sexual assault in her teenage years and early adulthood. We will talk about that in non-graphic terms in this episode, just so you know. And a fairly recent diagnosis of inattentive ADHD. It all makes for quite a life story. Jessica's work is all about stories. She's the author of 2 novels, Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, and a brand new book, Both Can Be True. Her novels prominently feature women who, like Jessica, deal with substance use disorders. Jessica lives in Northern California with her husband and 3 kids. I talked to her about the books, the drinking, the trauma, the Trojan horse strategy of reaching readers with a message, and how she went about finding a better life and more peace. A term to know that gets mentioned, EMDR, I've talked about it with guests on other episodes. That's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a type of therapy dedicated to addressing trauma. Hello, Jessica Guerrieri. It is so great to have you on In This Family.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Congratulations on your new book, Both Can Be True. Do people need to read your novels in order?
They can definitely pick up one at any time. So Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea it's basically a peek behind the curtain into what it actually looks like inside active alcoholism as a mother inside our modern world. Not the like hunting wives version where everybody's like partying and, making out with each other and like waking up the next day and like going to soccer practice. It's not that. It's the realities of what it actually looks like and the internalized thoughts of addiction as someone who's survived it, but in a fictionalized sense. Yeah. I did this very strategically because book clubs have become glorified wine clubs where people use the books as wine coasters and don't actually always read them. But how awesome is it that somebody could pick up a book, see their behavior, and then feel safe enough to start to identify problematic patterns and be ready to take that on in that journey, which for me actually was how I started, was through a fictionalized book. I read somebody's drinking that was abnormal. And I was like, okay, well, but it's fiction. So I'm still safe. Like I'm still good, but it planted a seed. And so that book can be used as a tool. I can tell you how many people they like, if I gifted this to like my mother-in-law, would she like know what I'm saying? And I was like, nope, because it's also about so many other things. But maybe that's the thing that she picks up on. So that's sneaky in that way.
Yeah.
Both can be true. Again, you can read in either order, but Both Can Be True is about 2 sisters, and one of them has long-term recovery. She has about 10 years, and a sexual assault trauma is sort of resurfaced, and then she explores other substances other than alcohol. Sounds very familiar. And her sister is they're sort of estranged because of their traumatic childhood. And then when one of the sisters' sponsees goes missing, they sort of have to come back together and sort of unbury their traumatic past.
Can we talk about what led to that intervention we heard about earlier? Were you aware that you really had a problem? Did your husband figure it out? Did the two of you talk about it?
My husband was coming from a background where he came from a family of like heavy drinkers, right? Like, and in the normal sense of the like celebratory, we're going to barbecues, we're doing these things. And yet they were able to do it in a responsible way that I couldn't keep up with. So he was like even more baffled because he was just like, just stop doing that. And so we would play all these games where it would be like, could you only drink wine? Could you only, I kept tally marks on my arm that were like, okay, so I did a shot, but I'll put this shot in blue and that means I can have 1 or 2. Okay, I'm going to go to 3 now. And then I forget to tally them. I literally tried it all. And luckily, we have fantastic communication, and we were able to talk about what was happening as much as I possibly could, given what I was willing to admit at that time. And he never gave me an ultimatum. The only ultimatum he ever gave me was, I will not have children with you when you drink like this. And I wanted to be a mother my whole life. I loved children. I was a special education teacher. I had so much love in my heart for kids. I always had all the cousins on my lap. And then the thought that I had the morning of when I stopped was, I want to drink more than I want to be a mom. And I was willing to give up that dream for drinking. And I thought that was the most powerful of the scariest of thoughts that I had. And the one that made me go, oh, this is a problem. And so once I shared that with him in recovery and sort of worked through that, actually 30 days into sobriety, I literally got my 30-day chip. I started to feel really sick. And I was like, wait, what's going on? And I took a pregnancy test in a recovery room meeting. And when I received my 30-day chip, I had a positive pregnancy test with my oldest daughter, Charlotte.
Anyone else in your family experience this? Parents, siblings?
Yeah.
Or was this a journey of your own?
So I have an aunt who was very vocal about her addiction. Actually, I share the story of when I was 13 years old, my dad called me home from a friend's house. And when you're 13 and you're just like everything is about you, right? Yeah. I'm raising a 12-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 7-year-old girls, and it's very much that right now. And my parents weren't super hands-on with me. It was very like child of the early 200s or 2000s, and so we were just like, roaming neighborhoods and stuff. And I was like, why are you calling me home? Like, you never call me home. Like, what's going on? And he like sat us down, me and my older sister, and he's like, I just want to tell you that your aunt is in recovery now. She is actually in a place called rehab, and she has a drinking problem, and she's getting help for her drinking. And I remember very distinctly in my 13-year-old mind, I thought, what does this have to do with me? Why do I care? Why am I here? And turns out it had everything to do with me because she actually was really vocal about recovery, 12-step programs, like the solution to alcoholism, and was not shy about it. And so she was actually one of the first people I called when I decided I needed help. And I also, the very same day that I said I needed help, I went to a meeting. I went to a newcomers meeting. I knew they were online, and then I knew like if I search for this, I will find it. And she just told me to listen for the similarities, don't listen for the differences. And that's what I did. I didn't want to, but I also didn't want to keep living the way that I was.
You've talked about being the victim of sexual assault in the past. Can you tell me about that?
So I'm the survivor of multiple sexual assaults, but the most impactful one, my My first week in college, I went to UC Santa Barbara. And actually, as a method of healing, first of all, I did EMDR this past year to cope with the trauma of that. And I also wrote about my assault almost verbatim in my book, Both Can Be True. And I found it so profoundly healing because for such a long time, my assault was alcohol related. I got in a car with a stranger who I did not know, but he had a car and ability to go get alcohol, and I had a fake ID. And again, that knowing that I should have trusted was going off all over the place and telling me, don't trust this person. But the addictive side of my brain was like, well, I can't be sober at a college party in a new environment. So I need to go get alcohol. And in doing that, he assaulted me. And for a long time, I took the shame and the guilt of that. Well, I got in the car. Well, I got in the elevator. Yeah, but he sexually assaulted me. And so I started to shut down, right? I completely shut down, became like a shell of myself, started drinking more. And luckily I had a lot of tools, and I went and sought help with resources. So I actually joined a survivor of sexual assault group. I was the only person that actually didn't get raped in the sense of the word, right? But I learned so much from these other women and felt so moved by their honesty and their vulnerability. They called me out a few times of me telling my story very detached and flippant. And I actually went to the counseling office because I felt so far away from home. I felt like Santa Barbara was the wrong place for me. And I just felt so unsafe, right? Because it had happened in my dorm within the first week of me arriving on campus.
Wow.
And when I talked with the counselor, and this is a direct quote, they told me, I said, I need to go closer to home. Like I got into other UCs. Can I please transfer to another UC? And they said, well, we transfer rapists to other UCs, so I'm sure we could transfer victims.
What?
Yeah.
That was their response. I've never heard anything like that before.
That was I graduated in 2003, so that was in 2004.
Wow, I'm really sorry that that's what you got from them and just the whole situation.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what did you end up doing?
So I actually ended up, well, it's funny. I actually got in trouble for drinking alcohol in my dorm, and I got punished for it. And I sat down with the chancellor person too, that was, going to instill my punishment. And I said, well, I just wanted to let you know this is what was going on. This is what's happening. And I got permission to do an inter-district transfer to UC Davis. And he's like, don't worry about the punishment then. Like, you're all set. This wasn't my first sexual assault. I was groomed as a child by a predator. And this is not an uncommon story.
Yeah.
And so I want to normalize the conversation from the side of the survivors.
Let's talk about earlier incidents when you were a teenager growing up. I'd like to know what happened then so parents might know what to watch for.
Absolutely. So this is actually why I went to EMDR, because what happened was, because of the Epstein files and everything that was happening on the news, I started to have a physical reaction to things that I was reading about, specifically around like 13, 14-year-old girls. And I thought it was because I was equating something happening to my daughters and the fear and the worry that like if that were to happen. And then I started going through my old journals because I'm writing my third book and I wanted to kind of get reference of this what it's like to be in the mind of a 13, 14-year-old girl. And when I did that, I came across entries that described this predator that I had blocked out.
Wow.
And I shared it in the sense of I knew that there was something wrong. He was in his early 20s. But I somehow had this idea that like, because I was, and I thought at the time I was thinking 16, I thought that was okay.
But you were really 13, 14.
But I was really 13 and 14, and I found the actual age. And also, I want to say, because this is really important, even if I was 16 and he's in his 20s, that's also predatory behavior.
Yes.
And I wasn't aware of this. I thought this was, attention. My parents were getting divorced at that time, and there was a lot of emotional turmoil in my house, parents moving in and out. And so I was seeking attention desperately. And what happened was this person, back in the day, there were like house parties where there would be like garage bands, right? And they would play like really terrible like ska music. And I would go to them, telling my parents that we were doing something else. I'm 6'1", and so I'm very tall, and I've always been really tall, so I look older. And I'd go to these parties, and there was a guy there that was specifically preying and targeting girls exactly like me. Made me feel special, got my phone number, did all of the things. And I also shared that one of his techniques was he is a survivor of what he told me was childhood cancer. And so he was missing a limb. And he used that to prey on my empathy. Actually, there was a show that I was watching with my husband sort of around this time. And in this show, they had like something about an amputee. And all of a sudden, I just started vomiting.
Wow. Powerful
and
reaction.
I couldn't understand what was happening, and come to find out that this was an emotional triggered response. My brain had literally protected me from the memory of that, and so he preyed upon me, he sexually abused me, and no one ever knew. My parents didn't know. They didn't know until very recently when I shared, and it was really devastating for them. It was really hard. My sister didn't know. She knew everything, because I thought it was all fine. I thought it was all normal because that's what he told me. And luckily with EMDR, truly, it's been amazing what I've been able to work through. Redefining those neural pathways, changing the pattern of it. I can talk about this story without throwing up. That's a big deal. I know that sounds insane, but if you're a survivor of trauma, it's hugely healing.
Yes. Yeah. Can you talk a bit more about your experience with EMDR?
Yeah.
We've had other guests use that treatment with great success. You used it to deal with both assaults?
I did use it for both times. And yes, and actually it's interesting how they sort of interweave once you sort of get into it. And what's really hard about it is it's funny to be a person in recovery. So the reason I drank was to escape, right? And so what EMDR is you have to sit inside the uncomfortable experience and just be in it. So I cannot tell you how difficult it is to do that as a person in sobriety. Every part of my body is like, run away. Like, don't be here. Don't do this. This is wrong. And so to learn how to sit in the discomfort and then be like, you're going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And working through that with a trusted person is not only like a healing experience for the trauma itself, but it was something that I needed to learn in who I am as a person, because I'm also, so I run races, I do Spartans, I love like physical exercise to like get out frustrations, but I'm a runner. Like, I'm like, no, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to feel this. I would rather numb it out. I would rather have euphoria. And EMDR doesn't allow that to happen. So I avoided it like crazy. I was like, how do I get out of these appointments? How do I not do this? And then I was like, I have to look at that. I have enough recovery under me to know, what am I avoiding? I write so much about escapism because that is the nature of motherhood. Everything about motherhood to me is so uncomfortable. It's so hard, and it makes me sit in like, I have reflections of me 24/7, these girls that are the hardest versions of me. And I'm like, I want to run away. I can't do this. And yet I have to sit in it, and I have to be there. I have to be there for them. So EMDR was so helpful for me for many ways, but specifically as an addict in recovery, learning to sit in the discomfort.
What were the things you were avoiding?
So the feelings, right? So I don't want to feel, one of the words that we came up with a lot was disgust. And that sense of like, the association, especially with what he, how he was preying upon me with using his childhood cancer, and like, I felt so guilty that I was so like horrified by him missing a limb that he used it against me. And so that idea of like, and like I went on to become a special education teacher because I have such empathy for, neurodivergence and all people in all walks of life. And so the idea that was used against me, because of course I was disgusted by him, and the action, right? And not the his physical disability, but I very much like, it was so hard. It was so hard to sit in that disgust, the idea of like in motherhood, like the overwhelm, right? So I'm newly diagnosed as inattentive ADHD. And one of the things that is so profound in me is sensory overwhelm. And what is motherhood if not sensory overwhelm? I have 3 kids, so it goes, can you get this? Can you do this? Where's this? I lost my shoe. The bunny's pooped in my lap again. It's everything all at once. And everything about that makes me uncomfortable. And it actually makes me like not want to do it. Except this is what I signed on for. This is what I stopped drinking for. So the like irony of all that is not lost on me. I have to find humor in it, right? Like, but I think that's just like the next lesson, right? That's the next thing. And also that I'm not very good at it. Like, I am not the best mother, right?
Well.
And like, that's okay. Like, I have these like standards of like what I thought I should be or what society says we should be. The trad wife thing, the yesteryear book that's out now of like, you should be able to do all this stuff. And I don't do any of that, and I don't do it well. But then I teach my kids that's okay.
That it's okay that you don't do everything, you mean?
That I don't do it well. That like I'm
Good.
really like I struggle with it, and it doesn't come easy. Because nothing for them is coming easy either. And that, like, I didn't have that as a child, that universal acceptance, unconditional love that was like, no, it's okay, because the way that mental health was presented in my childhood was just like, well, we don't really know what it is or talk about it, and it's probably all going to be fine. And that's not how it is in my house.
Yeah. And what do you find is the most challenging thing about being a parent?
So their suffering is not my suffering.
Yeah.
I remember my youngest daughter had colic for 4 months. And so between the hours of 5 and 6 or 5 and 9, depending upon the day, she cried. And she grew up to be my most spirited, most like me, going through her own celebrations of everything right now. And yet she was struggling and suffering as a baby, and I couldn't help her. And we were doing all the things, right? And we took her to the pediatrician. It was like, oh yeah, so she has colic. And I was like, okay, great. So how do we fix that? And they're like, yeah, we don't know. And I was like, that doesn't help me. And so my husband, he would hold her and feed her and do all the things. And then I would go on walks and I would call my dad and I'd walk the dogs. And we would have talks and I would just get my sanity back together. And I'd come back and my husband's just like holding her and she's crying and crying. And he's just like, he has like headphones on actually. And I was like, doesn't this physically hurt you? And he's like, no. Why would it? It's, and I was like, well, first of all, I grew her in my body. So like I feed her from my body. So I have a different connection. I know that. And I envied his ability to detach, right? To be like, oh, her pain is not my pain. So now we grow up and our kids are getting older. And I have to continually tell myself, like, her suffering is not my suffering. I can sit with her in the suffering, but I cannot take it on because that is not serving her. And that is my hardest challenge.
What you were talking about is so powerful. We really do need to be able to do that separation in our relationships,
Right.
whether it's with our children, partners, or with our friends. I wonder if you can explain how exactly you do that.
So remember, I didn't do this before because I was drinking. And during the pandemic, I actually used again, like I started doing drugs. So I also identify as an addict. And so because I felt too much, right? My kids, the whole world was crashing down around them in the pandemic. It's my job to keep them regulated, all this stuff. And so I was like, nope, can't do it. I can't feel anything. I need to numb it out. So just for the listener, give yourself grace of that too, because it's not perfect. I'm not perfect. This wasn't perfect. It was a learning curve. And so once I got clean and recognized that, nothing was on the table. I can't take on a substance to get outside of myself to cure what's going on inside of myself. So my big thing that, I do is, I have to stay in it with them. Right. So if my daughter is suffering and I'm sitting with her, like I can be there with her, right? So I'm not trying to like, okay, well, in a few weeks we get to go to the beach and it's going to be so great. Yeah. Oh, wow. Oh gosh. Tell me about like, what are you worried about? And she can tell me what she's worried about. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, that is scary. And before it was like, let's go, let's be outside of this pain. And because I was so terrified of being in it, right? And so the thing that I say to my kids all the time that I have to say to myself is like, it's okay to be sad. I was like, wait a minute. And like what I've noticed is I just read about completing the stress cycle. And so one of the things that is so helpful for me is like full tears, right? Like breakdown, like I just need a full sob to get there. And it's actually very true of my oldest daughter. She also, like, once she can release that, I see her reset. And we used to be afraid of the tears, right? Like, oh my gosh, something's wrong. We have to fix it. We have to fix it. And it's like, what's so wrong with being sad? Some really beautiful things come out of being sad. I read some really powerful books about being sad, and it doesn't kill you, right? Like it's okay to be in that sadness. And so to know that like, this is her sadness. It's not my sadness. There will be a moment where I have the sadness for sure. But then I'm going to use my tools by writing about it, doing it. And then so I can show up for her and her sadness. 'Cause it's not her job to take on mine. And that is also a challenge, right? As they get older, like, your emotional custody does not lie with your children. And that I had to learn that in real time as an adult, because, it was different for me growing up. So yeah, it's a lot. And it's imperfect. It's an imperfect system.
Did you ever feel like you were going to cave and turn back to alcohol? And if so, what stopped you from going there?
Yeah. So like I said, I relapsed with drugs in the pandemic. And by drugs, I like to be very specific on this. I live in California and THC is legal. And so gummies and vaping and all of that, I was like, oh, this is a get out of jail free. Like, first of all, I have 3 kids under the age of 5. I'm homeschooling them, and there's California fires, so we're not allowed outside, and that was for months at a time. I was completely isolated, and my depression came back, my anxiety came back, like everything, and also all of my recovery meetings were moved to online. The thing about community is, this is great, and it's so nice to connect with you, but I need a human being, right, to like truly feel that connection. There's something about the end of a recovery meeting. We all hold hands for a reason. It's to show that, you're not alone. And so I just felt so profoundly alone. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to drink, because I knew at that time I had 6 years of sobriety and I had enough recovery in me. But I started like exploring the idea of like, okay, well, what about other stuff? Like, and also it's the end of the world. So what does it matter, right? And so it started with like THC. And I was like, okay, like this isn't perfect. And I would go and look up like all the types of THC that was like mimics the sensation of alcohol. Literally, like I would Google it and I would say like, I want the euphoria. I want the checkout. I want the like, I just like plug me in and I'm gone, right? And my kids watched a lot of Bluey. And so I started there, and then I had a procedure done, and I was prescribed painkillers, and that was the end of that. And actually, luckily, so I started mixing the two, right? And I was like, okay, well, how do I get the high a little better? How do I get it closer to that feeling of euphoria and drunk? And that was the moment that I was like, oh my God, addiction, it got me again.
Yeah.
It got me again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question. And again, thank you for sharing your experiences related to that. I really appreciate that what you're describing is so current right now in our society among adults and children, with the shift from the alcohol to the THC, and people needing to ask themselves the same questions, and how is this really affecting and showing up? And so thank you for that. Well, you referenced like anxiety and depression, and you talked about inattentive ADHD. And so I'm sort of curious, like, how was mental health showing up for you in your childhood?
Obviously, I love all things psychology. I could talk to you all day long about this. I find it so fascinating. I minored in psychology.
Wow.
But because I just I couldn't reconcile things that were happening inside my own mind. And so that's why I became a writer. It's just to try and like to tease it out. But later in life, I start to notice these patterns of behavior in my own children, right? And it's in girls, it presents very differently than boys. And so I was a high functioning person, right? I got straight A's. I went to a UC. I won awards. I did all the stuff. I was an athlete. But I had to work really hard, like to the point of profound suffering, and suffering at the cost of abuse, right? So sexual abuse. And like, this was all part of my like masking behavior, right? And so come to find out, as I'm watching my daughters struggle with some of these similar challenges of like disorganization and like that inattentive, like also emotional regulation, emotional overwhelm, like everything all at once and then shut down, like, and not being able to regulate an emotion that's like, okay, well, the response to this should be like, okay, I need a second or whatever it is. No, it's 1,000. It's explosion, yelling, running away. It's doing all the stuff that I'm very familiar with. And then I was like, okay, well, I feel like there's more to this because I, again, am a very high functioning person. And then I started to explore inattentive ADHD because I was like, okay, my whole life I've been diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and that was the go-to.
Okay.
I know for a fact as a young child I had OCD. I would do OCD through intrusive thoughts.
We should probably explain what OCD is. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, right?
Right.
Intrusive thoughts. So say more about that.
Yeah. So, and again, I didn't learn the term intrusive thought until therapy in my 30s and 40s. Actually, I think my children told me the word intrusive thought because of their therapy. And I was like, what? This is the perfect way to describe it, because I thought as a human, as a woman, don't we just have intrusive thoughts all the time? Yes, but also sometimes they impair your ability to be able to live your life. And so for me, what it looked like was this. It was triggered by Polly Klaas's kidnapping. Yeah. I was almost identical to her age. I grew up about an hour from where she was, and it was everywhere.
Can we just pause for a minute and just explain really quick? So this was about, I believe her death was like 1993-ish, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
She was she was at her house having a slumber party, I believe, if I remember the
Correct.
history, and was abducted out of the house and killed, correct?
Sexually abused and killed, yes. And so I became like consumed by this because I had this like obsessive fear of death. I was, afraid that something horrible was going to happen to me. Worst case that I get abducted, murdered. I don't think I knew about the sexual assault piece. And so how my brain tried to rectify this was control, right? And so what I would do was anywhere between 1,000 to 10,000 times a day, I would concoct things in my mind that had to happen in a sequence, in a scenario. And it could be anything from like, if the phone doesn't ring in 3 seconds, I'm going to get abducted and killed. If the dog doesn't bark, I'm going to get killed. And then I would make up these patterns and they had to happen in a certain way. And so that was the only place that my mind was 24/7. I wasn't allowed to share with anyone because that was part of the obsessive and intrusive thought. So I never shared with my family what was going on. They just watched me like disappear. And so the beginning of my mental illness was OCD. And it didn't look like tapping. It didn't look like the ritualized behaviors that a lot of people, associate with OCD. It was all intrusive thoughts. And so come to find out, I turned 41 and I'm like, intrusive thoughts as a part of OCD and as a part of ADHD. And the way that like your brain is trying to normalize and control situations which you don't have control of. And what is motherhood if a lack of complete control?
Right.
And so that's where I'm at this crossroads of like, okay, so it's time to like give myself a break.
Yeah.
No wonder I became an alcoholic and an addict. Mm-hmm. That was a coping strategy for my neurodivergence.
Yes.
What came first, the chicken or the egg, my OCD, my whatever it was? None of that matters to me and genuinely. And I say this with my full heart. I would not go back in time to change my addiction. It's a part of my personality. My recovery is a part of my story, my voice. But I also have to deeply give myself grace because I am a disorganized disaster and completely flawed in that capacity, in that sense. And it's not actually like my fault. And I spent so much time being so hard on myself and being like, well, what's wrong with you? Also, you're raising your kids to be like that. What's wrong with you? Do it better. That's not helpful. And so getting there has been this like tremendous process. And like since I turned 40, I ran my first marathon.
Wow.
You know, I'm publishing my second book. Like my whole life has just opened up because I've given myself the opportunity to like give myself a break and just be like, you're doing okay. You're doing okay. And I think my job, my role is to help be the voice of that. Having survived addiction twice, being an advocate for mental health, I'm lucky to be able to do that because a lot of people don't make it to that other side.
When did the OCD, intrusive thoughts, to the level that you described when you were younger, when did that subside for you or change or shift in how it manifested?
When I found drinking.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
When I discovered alcohol, everything quieted down.
Yeah.
So I would drink to the point of passing out because sleeping was my hardest challenge. If I laid my head down and I wasn't on sleeping pills and alcohol, there were too many thoughts in my head that I could not stop. And I was so tired and I was so mentally exhausted. And the way that I think about the world, the way that I internalize things, which, you know, I turned into a full-time career as a writer, I thought, shh, stop. And alcohol shut that off.
Without the alcohol and you really doing the hard work, learning to be with yourself, to be present, to feel your feelings, and to manage them appropriately, how has that impacted your OCD?
Yeah, so through therapy, through hard work, you know, it's funny, my therapist is like, you know, OCD like doesn't like cure itself. And I was like, yes, like thank you. Luckily I've learned to like turn the intrusive thoughts. I don't do any sort of the ritual, mental rituals anymore. In postpartum, I did have a really hard time, which again, like not surprising. All of these things turn up. And I actually didn't know I had postpartum depression until I had my second daughter. And I found exercise. And I realized like how much the exercise helped me. And then the thoughts that I was having that were so dark with my oldest daughter, I was like, oh, I think I had postpartum depression before. I'm so happy I don't have it now. But physical exercise helped me 1,000% to like find a healthy way to check outside. Books, reading, writing, all of that. But being vigilant of it and being aware of it, and not letting it creep up on me. It's like when I know like I need to go to a meeting, on my like 13th birthday for sobriety, I was in a horrible mood, which is ridiculous because I was like, it's such a happy day. But like my family wasn't doing the right things, like celebrating me. And it was just like, and I was like, 13 years and forever. Oh my gosh, that's so overwhelming, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, nope, I need to go be around other people that know what I'm going through and understand what this milestone actually means. Because while my husband is super supportive, he's not in recovery. And so it's like just knowing what you need and then doing it, which isn't always easy, right? It's like, oh, I need to go run. Like, no, thank you. I don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. But that's the nature of addiction in a nutshell. Like, and I've lived that my whole life, right? Like, of course I want to just like take a shot, right? When my kids are screaming at me, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, no, that's not it. That's not the answer. But it took so much, as you could hear, to get here.
Yeah.
So much.
Knowing all of the experience you have with alcohol and drugs and your addiction, what are you and your husband telling your kids about substances? How has this affected your parenting?
Yeah, so I'm not afraid of it, right? So I parent it in a way where I am super vocal, obviously is age appropriate. I have a 7-year-old, I have an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old. At this point, my kids know that I'm in recovery. They know what that means. They know that I don't drink alcohol, but their dad does, and what that means. They know that I sponsor women and that I need a sponsor. They know that I need to go to meetings in order to stay sober. There has been a lot of confusion, especially with my 12-year-old lately, of like catching the disease of alcohol. Unfortunately, she is a child of COVID. She was the kindergarten class of COVID. And so virus, disease, people wearing masks, you can imagine how disorienting this is for a 12-year-old mind. And so I've had to explain to her that that's such a good question. Like, can you catch it? And also, like, why are other adults drinking alcohol if it's this bad thing for you? And these are all these are really hard questions to answer as an adult, let alone as someone in recovery. But I'm just super honest with her. And I say, we have the genetic predisposition. It's in our DNA, just like, there are gifts that, Daddy and I have given you. He's an engineer, so he gave you the math. I gave you the English. Together, you're the perfect little human minds. But also, I did give you the gene of addiction, which means that if you decide to drink alcohol, and my 12-year-old is like, I'm never drinking alcohol. That sounds terrible. We watch a lot of shows where they show what happens with drinking. Our favorite show is Gilmore Girls, and we watch it together and we talk about life lessons. They do a lot of drinking and feeling like crap. And she's like, I don't understand. Like, why would people do that? And I was like, it's one of those things that some people, once they start, they can't stop. I was one of those people. I wanted more of it and more of it and more of it. And it's just how my brain is wired. And I had to learn that lesson the hard way. But luckily, I found recovery. This was the solution. Some people are able to drink and have a drink or two drinks and be like, that's it. I can take it or leave it. It's fine. Oh, I like the feeling of, she's like, well, what's the appeal? And I was like, the appeal is it does make you feel silly. It can make you feel fun. I would hit that point and then I would take it too far. I'm very honest with her that I say I showed signs of like I might have addictive like personality stuff super young. I could never like have a bowl of ice cream. Like I would go sneak and steal the entire thing of ice cream and then like figure out how to replace it and do things that's like kind of sneaky. And so one of the things that I tell them very vocally is we don't do sneakiness in our house because that's the beginning of this like hiding piece that I had to learn in real time about shame and like, well, what am I hiding? Why am I hiding it? The greatest thing that I can teach them is like, if they are feeling those things, there's no shame attached to it. Don't be sneaky.
Well, Jessica, it has been absolutely wonderful to have you on in this family.
I'm so thrilled we got to chat today. This was so much fun.
Me too. And I this has just been wonderful. I wonder if you could tell the listeners where they can find you.
I am on Instagram way too much. Talk about like needing to break one of my own bad habits, but at Jessica Guerrieri, Guerrieri, author is my handle on Instagram. You can also find me, Jessica Guerrieri Author is my author website. You can access all of my books, all of the podcasts that I've been on. And if you want to support local, you can do bookshop.org is a great way to support local if you want to buy books, that way, not via Amazon, but I'm also available on Amazon.
In This Family is presented by Nexus Family Healing, a national nonprofit mental health organization. You can learn more about Nexus and how to support our mission at nexusfamilyhealing.org. The show is produced by John Moe with music from Jeremy Messersmith. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe, rate, and write a review. I'm Dr. Michelle K. Murray. See you next time.